Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
All right, greetings everyone, and welcome back to another great episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Daniel Lowry, and in today's episode, it's more in our A+ series, trying to round that out for you guys. And speaking of rounding out, we're actually moving into a part 2 on Mac operating system and Linux features that you might find inside of that exam. Joining us back in the studio yet again to continue that conversation, our good friend, Mr. Wes Bryan. Wes, welcome back, sir. How's it going?
Man, it's going great. When you said round it out, I'm glad you weren't talking about my figure. I thought that's where you were going for sure.
We're going to eat a bunch of potato chips.
That's right. Bring on the bread. That's right. We're coming back in a part 2, like Dan said, on our Mac OS and our Linux features, and we're just basically working through our list of objectives. If you weren't with us in the first part, remember we talked about some basics, right? Backups. Talked about some of the disk maintenance utilities that you have and some of the things that you could do for scheduling your backups, if you will. System updates we mentioned as well, things like patch management, driver and firmware updates. And basically what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of pick up right where we left off. And the next subject that we have to talk about is one that sometimes you don't really mention too much in these operating systems because, well, let's face it, Windows, they got the big target on their chest, and a lot of times people are attacking these Windows-based systems. And what I'm talking about is anti-malware or antivirus software. Now, when I say that, don't expect that Macs don't get viruses. Don't expect that a Linux system can't get a virus, right? You just have to understand that for the most part, these pieces of software, they're written in the DNA of a Windows machine. Right? A lot of times that's what they're doing. They're writing it in some kind of format that is specific to Windows. Now, I would tell you one thing that I have heard before, and again, debatable here, don't want to get into too much of a debate, is that sometimes you can download viruses that don't affect the Mac, and because they're not written in the DNA of a Mac operating system, they don't affect it. But the moment that you connect that Mac machine to a Windows environment, well, now you might have a problem. So whether that's hearsay or whether that's truth or fact or fiction, I'll leave that to you. But keep in mind, there is a reason you have antivirus and anti-malware software out there for both operating systems. So let me show you what I mean here. On our Mac operating system, I'm just going to go to the App Store. And ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind, we've got an entire series in the library, our course library, about antivirus software and security, all kinds of different security products out there. So we're not really endorsing one over the other, but
just have one, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Make sure you use one, right? So you just go into your App Store, if you will, and you can just type in antivirus, right? And type in antivirus, and you'll see that sure enough, they come up on the list, right? There's a reason why something like one of the biggest companies out there that's really finds a lot of these viruses out there has, like Trend Micro, right? They're out there. So understand that which one you use is really up to you, but there are a lot of them out there, and there is a reason they're there, right? Things like adware as well, too. So antivirus, anti-malware software, keep in mind what you use is up to you. That's your choice, but I can't agree more with Dan. Just make sure you are going to use these in some kind of, especially if you're bringing these operating systems into a Windows environment. Really, that's just, a lot of times that's just protecting you, the Windows environments as well. Same thing goes here if we just kind of switch right on over to our Ubuntu and we go to our Ubuntu software. Again, you can also type right in here. You can look for software here too. And if we do an anti-malware, well, guess what? Oh, or antivirus. Now, that'd be interesting if antivirus doesn't come up. Let's see, yep, so Clam here, right? So you can see that there's a graphical front end, right? So for essentially, you also have them inside of Ubuntu as well. It's kind of interesting. There's not a lot of them, it seems like, but they are there.
Software store.
Right, they're not in the software store.
Sophos runs for Linux. I've installed. I love Sophos for Linux. Great piece. You just got to go out there and find them. Sometimes they're not available in their little stores that they create.
Yeah, good point. And again, we're not really endorsing any one over the other. Again, just make sure that you have them, whichever one you do go with. Now, moving on, there's some other things that we have to talk about as well. And one of those things really has to do with, well, restoration, right? We talk about backups, right? Well, we've talked about, in the first episode, we talked about Time Machine, right? Time Machine is what you're going to use to back up your software. Well, there might be a point in time where you have to restore from a backup. Well, what are you going to do? How are you going to do that when the time comes? So if I bump back over here to my one of these screens here, bump back over to our Mac operating system, notice I have my time machine. If you remember, I ejected it in the first episode. Went ahead and plugged this back in when we were off camera, right? But what I can do is I can go up to a couple different ways that you can do this. Again, if you go to your menu, you can always use your little command button, command spacebar shortcut, or I could go up to the top here, your help menu bar, and then go, and then applications, and that'll take me. And if I scroll down, I'll find Time Machine there. Now, because I use Time Machine a lot, we're always tweaking our computers and doing things to them that maybe sometimes you shouldn't do. So for me, I don't really want to have to search for it. So it's got this nice preference that I'll show you again if you don't remember it from the first episode, that you can actually put it in your help bar up here, your menu bar, and you'll see that it's a little icon. Now, remember that one of the things that you can do is you can schedule a backup. The moment that it's plugged in, it runs its backup. And it actually did this when I plugged the machine, or plugged the hard drive back into the USB port here. But you can also enter Time Machine, or you can enter the Time Machine preferences. Let's go ahead and open the preferences here real quick. I just want to recap. Keep in mind that you can put this in the menu bar, and that's where we can see that. Now, if you are going to do a restoration, right, if you're going to do a restore or from a snapshot, then what you can do here is you can use your little icon here, and you can enter Time Machine. Now, when you enter Time Machine, you're going to see this kind of the 3D screen here with multiple windows. It looks like multiple Finder windows. But you'll also see that you have kind of like this slider bar. My head's kind of covering it up right now. Just like in Windows, they put a lot of things in the lower right-hand corner. Well, this also has the lower right-hand corner likewise. But if I wanted to, I could select specific dates, right? Dates and times that I want to do backups, depending on if it's an hourly backup. You might have multiple backups or snapshots, if you will, to do a restore from in a single day. Or you can just choose this up and down arrow, right? And you can see I can choose whichever one it is that I want. And then I could pick this and I could do the restore, right? Restore the snapshot here. All right, so that's one of the ways that you can do, well, that's the way that you would do it here in your Mac OS or Mac operating system. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this, because we can also do this inside of your Ubuntu environment too. Now, remember that to do this in the Ubuntu environment, let me go ahead and close our Ubuntu software application down, and we'll go back to our Unity search here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to type disks, right? And we're going to reopen disks here. Now, in the disks part here, what you can do is you can actually go up to the little settings icon here. If I zoom into that, you can see that a little bit better. And if I can create a disk image, right? So I can image the disk, and that essentially will give me the ability to take a snapshot of the entire drive, right? And its current state with all the applications and all the current configuration settings. And then guess what? Well, if I need to restore, it's not really too difficult to find, right? They make it kind of easy to find, just like they do here in Time Machine inside of your Mac OS.
It seems like a smart move on their part.
It really is,
Let's
right?
make this process as easy as humanly possible.
Most
in case
definitely.
you kind of hose your machine.
Yeah.
You're back at it and you don't hate our guts.
Yeah, that's right. Why don't you work? Yeah. So that's a good thing. That's one of the ways that you can do it inside of Ubuntu. Now, there are more technical ways that you can create like bootable disks, if you will, and that's through the DD command, I believe. The disk duplicator, data duplicator here creates boot images. Now, I did talk to one of our other hosts, Don Pizzette, and he's like Dan, really knows Linux. He said you got to be careful with that, because DD can get very, very finicky with drive sizes and drive layout, right? So it doesn't like to restore to different drives and stuff like that, different drive sizes. And you also have to make sure that you're not just copying or making a copy of the partition, just the partition. You gotta use make sure you have the boot partition as well. So a little bit more complex to it, but we do just want to mention the DD command there, because it is in the objectives. objectives, understand that that's the data duplicator or disk duplicator, if you will.
Data destroyer.
Data destroyer, like Dan was mentioning. And what it was originally used for, which is kind of interesting, is it was really used to take data and convert it to tape format and take it off of tape format and convert it. So it basically does conversion as well. So that's a little bit about restoring your snapshots, doing a restore or from a snapshot. Again, those are both in there, and we're just going to mention them both here, both on the Ubuntu Linux side, if you will, as well as the Mac operating system, and that will allow you to do image recovery, like you've seen here inside of the Ubuntu system. You have to create the disk image first. You can't restore a disk image if you don't have one to begin with. So do keep that in mind. All right, so moving on here inside of our, our objectives that we have, some of the other things that they call out screen sharing. Now, when we look at screen sharing is something that you can do inside of your, like for instance, inside of your Mac operating system, or Mac OS, excuse me. And it relies on a Wi-Fi Direct technology, and Wi-Fi Direct is actually an implementation. It's part of the 802.11 standard, and what Mac calls theirs, Apple calls theirs, is what's known as Air Display. And you can actually see the Air Display settings. If we dive in here to our Mac operating system and we go to System Preferences, and then we go to Display, you'll see that I have the ability to turn Air Display on or off, and you can see that we've got a couple here. We've got a game room. You can imagine where the game room is, but I don't want to enter any codes here for the game room. But if I do decide to do that, I could basically share the screen of my Mac there inside of the game room for the Apple TV that we have. So understand that you can do screen sharing. Now, following along the same lines, too, that you also have the ability to do is multiple desktops, right? You can do this, and you can get to this a couple different ways. In Mac, they call it mission control. And if you look at my dock here, dock, again, is kind of like, well, we call it like in a Windows environment. You'll call this the taskbar. They call it the dock here inside of your Mac operating system. But down here in the dock, you have what's known as mission control, right? And I can launch mission control, and if I launch that, you'll notice that I've got a couple of desktops already created. I'm using gestures, three-finger swipe here to swipe back and forth between the different desktops that I have. But you can also use mission control to add additional desktops too. So for instance, if I add another one, now it gives me a completely blank slate. And if I happen, let's say I open System Preferences here, well, I can actually switch. See that I have the two multiple desktops going here, and notice that System Preferences, it isn't on here, right? It isn't inside, or it isn't on this desktop. But the other way you could use is you could use a gesture and do a three-finger swipe up, and it also takes you into your mission control to get to your different desktops as well. So cool little feature. This is also inside of other Linux distros as well, the ability to switch between multiple desktops. Windows, and we're not worried about in the A+ at this point in the 900 series about Windows 10. Windows 10 just recently started to add this feature that they now have multiple desktops, but Linux has been doing this for a very long time now. They had a really cool feature that you could do too. You could do a 3D rotation that was really cool in some of the earlier.
That was a cool one. I remember that.
CompTIA, I think, is one of the softwares that could do that, and that was really cool because what you could do is you could do a whole complete three-dimensional rotation.
It looked like a cube kind of turning on its axis.
And one of the things that was really cool about that, Dan, was the fact that one of my friends that I used to go to school with when we were studying for computers, as he would rotate the desktop, he'd have something playing on YouTube, and you could see right through the desktop and see the other desktop still playing the video in the background. So
that's cool.
It's something that's been around a lot, for a while now. It's gained more popularity in additional operating systems, again, like Windows 10. But don't worry in the 900 series for Windows 10 because they really only call out the Windows 8 operating system at this point, or Windows 8.1. All right, so that takes care of a couple of the other things that we need to talk about. I mentioned gestures, but I just kind of said, hey, here a gesture, right? gestures are really cool because when you have something like your trackpad, right, on your laptop, it allows you the ability to just do like swipes, you might also hear them called, based on some of the settings, and you can really change, you can do a lot of cool features with it, right? So if we show my desktop again, if I use a 3-finger swipe, I can go between multiple desktops, right? I can also do a 3-finger swipe up, and that gives me the ability to do things like get into mission control. You can manipulate how gestures work inside of the Mac OS here, and we can go up to our little Apple icon here. And I know you guys, it's kind of hard to see that, so let me kind of zoom in so you guys can see what's kind of going on here. I'm using the Apple icon, right? And then if we scroll down, we have our system preferences, right? And inside of our system preferences, you'll see that I believe this is in trackpad right here. Notice trackpad. And then notice that you have, and in fact, this is kind of cool because they got the video here kind of showing you what's going on, right? Now, if you have like a magic pad, that's something that we have in the background. We have like at our desks too. You could also set up a Bluetooth magic pad or trackpad, Bluetooth trackpad. Max it just happens to be called a magic pad because everything's magic.
It magically doesn't work.
That's right. It
Why
magically
aren't you
needs to be
connected?
That's right. So you can use those as well. But notice that it gives you the ability to do swipes, and it shows you, like if I select one, what are you doing? And again, just little gestures, right? You can, for instance, if I was to, let's see, if I pull up Google here, right? And I want to zoom in, right? That's your pinch to zoom. Most of you probably seen this if you've got a cell phone, right? And you've opened up a document or something and you do the pinch to swipe and it opens it up, right? So you can do things like that. Gestures are really, really good. They can make it really easy to work with your trackpad and work with your operating system in general, and really can kind of enhance the user experience.
I know we're
there.
talking Mac OS and Linux, but I remember Microsoft and Samsung, I think, they did this table and it had like 300 points where it would recognize 300 different points of contact. So like multiple people could what do you call it? What's the word? Starts with a C, where we work together.
Collaborate.
Yeah, collaborate. Thank you. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. I want to say conglomerate. Collaborate on the same project at the same time. It's really cool software.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
Hardware.
You know, and even earlier than that, Vista brought in a lot of these where they were using, I know people don't like to talk too much about Vista, but would bring in digitizers, right? And the digitizers, you could use flicks and stuff like that. So they, you know, a little bit different than gestures in general. But yeah, they've definitely come a long ways in the technology. All right, so that is gestures. Also, they mentioned Finder. Finder is kind of like what Windows has Windows Explorer, File Explorer, depending on which generation of Windows you're looking at. Windows 7, they call it Windows Explorer up until Windows 7, and then beyond that they call it File Explorer. Well, Finder is basically the file and folder or directory utility that you use in the graphical user interface in order to be able to work with your files and folders and applications, pretty much everything inside of the Mac operating system. Let me show you what I mean here. So if you have left your dock the same, you have Finder down here in the lower left-hand corner. Understand that if you click the desktop and you make the desktop the focus, you also have Finder up here too. So you can use this right from the menu bar as well. So it depends on how you want to launch this. And you can launch, basically, you can launch your Finder, right? And you can see here that on the left-hand side of the screen here, we have kind of like the hierarchy, right? We have favorites here. We've got your devices. These are different devices that are available. You can see, for instance, my Passport here, the drive that I'm using for Time Machine is here. Remote disk. Remote disk is very, very cool. This is kind of a cool utility because you know one of the things that you're not really seeing in laptops anymore? DVD drives. Optical drives, right? Where we're basically going to solid state media and we're using USB thumb drives. Well, remote disk is a great way that, let's say Dan's computer supported DVD, the optical drive, DVD sharing. Well, guess what? I could click remote disk, and if it was available, I could basically use his optical drive, right? That's a great little thing to have because of the fact that, for the most part, your laptops don't have optical drives anymore. So you can also see that in Finder as well. You can manipulate the way Finder looks, right? We got different ways to look. Let me go ahead and get back up here to the top. There we go. So I can, if I want, it depends on what kind of view you might want. And here comes the gestures again. I'm doing a two-finger swipe at the top. I can also, change this to a traditional, like a file or directory hierarchy if I want. And then you got potentials to do like your right clicks. Again, if we do a right click inside of your Finder window, well, you can also do things like right clicks here as well too, as well as sharing files and folders, right? So a lot of different things you can do. You can even search pretty much through your hard drive for different files and directories or folders if you want, all inside of Finder. So pretty much just know what Finder is and also know what remote disk is as well. All right, now that moves us into one other thing that we have to be aware of inside of our Mac operating system. I always want to say operating, it's Mac OS, right? Yeah. Mac OS is something known as iCloud. Now, iCloud is another thing that you can get through if you get into your, again, if we go to our menu bar here to the top and we choose Go, and then we go to actually, I say applications, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's not in applications. Let me close this down and get you to the right side of the river here. Let's try that again. So if I go to Go, you'll notice that iCloud Drive is right there in the list, right? So that gives me the ability, imagine this, to launch up iCloud, right? And
I'm blown away, Wes.
Wow, yeah. I'm glad you came to the episode.
I made orange juice.
That's right. So keep in mind that this is their cloud-based solution. You can also back up your devices to iCloud if you want. You can restore them down from iCloud. Great thing to have, especially, at Microsoft, they have things like OneDrive. You probably heard of Google Drive out there. So most of the major platforms have them. Well, guess what? Apple isn't short on their cloud-based solution too. This is their software as a service based solution there, and it's integrated right into your Mac OS, as well as things like your iPads, iPhones, and I've never owned an iPod, so I don't know. I can only imagine if it's part of the iOS, then it's also going to be on iPods. Yeah, it's there as well. Yeah, very good. All right, so that's a few more of the utilities that we kind of needed to know. There are a couple of other things, right? They mentioned something known as, Keychain, all right? And Keychain is basically a place to store things like your certificates, authentication credentials, if you will, and you can also get to that. Keep in mind that you do have to be an administrator to get there. And the way we get to Keychain is we'll go ahead and we'll go to our menu bar again. We'll go to Go. Wow, that's redundant. And then we'll launch Utilities. And I believe in Utilities here, yeah, Keychain Access. There you go. You got it right there. And we can launch this up. And I don't know how much of this I want to show on screen. We'll show all of it. All right. And you can see the different things that I've logged into as well, like things like my Apple ID, right? And again, it's more about authentication and managing certificates and stuff surrounding passwords as well, all there in Keychain. You can see some of the encryption information right there, right? RSA encryption, and it shows me what the key length is, so and what the usage is. So again, keep in mind that does require administrative access. There are some times that you have to get in there. I've had to get in there before because some certificate mismatches have happened before. I can't remember what I was doing. I think it was SSHing from a terminal on the Mac into a sent box, and the RSA key or something like that had changed or something like that. So I had to get down in here and I had to basically delete the SSH key for whatever reason. Again, your average end users a lot of times will never have to do anything to that. And if you want more information about Mac OS, Dawn Pizzette, one of our hosts, brilliant SME, has done a whole entire series on Mac that you can really get down in depth on that. All right, now, one of the other things that they also call out that is specific to Mac is something known as Boot Camp. Now, Boot Camp is kind of interesting. Let's say that you had a necessity that what you wanted to do is you wanted to run the Windows operating system, but you have a Mac, all right? That sometimes isn't very uncommon. It's not uncommon. Actually, it's very common to do that is what I'm trying to say, because we have to do this, and we have to do this a lot, right? We do this through virtualization. In fact, if you'll see, if I go back to my screen here real quick, you'll see that I have VMware, right? Well, VMware has their own set of drivers that allows you to virtualize, and we've talked about virtualization in other episodes here in the 902 series, and there's sometimes some functionalities that are lost in virtualization, and what you don't need is that software type 2 hypervisor in between. you need access to the raw hardware, right? And maybe you need to do this in a Windows environment, right? So I would lose some of the functionality. Like for instance, if I was to boot up my Windows operating system right here, one of the things that VMware would not allow me to do is see the wireless adapter. So if I wanted to do anything to show you guys wireless communications, I have to get my Windows machine out. We'd have to plug the, which isn't a bad thing.
I think you can plug in a USB wireless adapter and it would detect that as wireless.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But if I need physical access to the hardware within inside of the machine,
that's a little more.
That's where boot camp comes in, right? And that's essentially what boot camp. In fact, I went ahead and did a boot camp for one of the shows that we're going to do. We really didn't do it for this show, but I can kind of show you what's going on here. So if we take a look at my screen here, don't get into the boot camp drive itself. That's actually storing Windows. In fact, if I do you can do a Command I on this if you want for a get info, or just right click on it. You can actually see, I believe, yeah, there we go. See how it says NTFS, or the New Technology File System. This is actually a 60 gig drive. It's actually a 60 gig partition that I created when I installed Windows, basically like a dual boot situation. So for instance, if we, I'm trying to remember, where is Boot Camp? I want to say it's in it might be in Utilities, the Boot Camp Assistant. Yes, there we go. And you can see right here that we have the Boot Camp Assistant, right? And if I launch this up, this would give me the ability to basically install Windows operating system right on this machine. And it's not going to see it, I don't believe. Yeah, it wants to do a restore because I've already got Windows on here. And now essentially we could do a dual boot. Now let me go ahead, and what I'm going to do, since we've already got this, I'm going to close this down. And what I could do is I could turn it around and I could restart this machine, and essentially I could launch into Windows, right? I could restart the machine and I'm natively launched right on the Windows operating system, and I have access to the hardware. I don't know if we can show. I'm not sure. We're going to try this one here, and why not? Let's go ahead. What we're going to do is we're going to restart our machine. Now, be careful, because once you do this, your Mac is always going to boot to Windows. All right? You have to hold the Option button down during the boot time. And let me see if it'll actually... You have to
hold a button down with Mac to make it do something you want it to do.
That's right. And here I can hear a rant coming on. Yeah. Boy, when we stop this episode, right? So let me go ahead. I'm going to restart this, and we'll see how well this works here. So maybe you guys will get a chance to see that. And actually, it's doing a graceful shutdown on an Ubuntu operating system, because apparently I didn't. So we'll go ahead and we'll let the Ubuntu operating system shut down. And essentially, what's going to happen is it's going to do a graceful shutdown on the Mac operating system. And what it should do is boot into, or just turn around and reboot this machine. And I'm hoping what we're going to see here is we're going to actually see it turn around and boot into Windows. Now, if it doesn't, I can feel access to the trackpad in the background. So it does look like that it's booting here. But again, and you know what? It might try to boot to oh, there we go. And I don't know if you guys could see that out there. I do have a Windows boot screen here in the background. And we will see if it gets started here. You can't really see it on the screen right now, so we're going to have to figure out what's going on here. It might just be a driver issue.
It's probably a driver issue.
Probably a driver. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So
drivers have kicked in.
Yes, the drivers are there. Yeah. So you can see that I do have the option to boot right into a Windows operating system. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to restart this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold in the Option button and restart it. I just wanted to show you that you guys have seen what the Windows operating system, this is Windows 10. Again, don't worry about Windows 10 for this, the 900 series, but it shows you what Boot Camp gives you the ability to do. And now I'm rebooting the machine, and I don't see that it is going to show you that, but again, you do get the ability to choose the Mac drive, and that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So I get to reboot right back into the Mac OS, and again, now the Mac OS is taking control basically of the hardware, like we've talked about in other episodes when you do a multi-boot situation. And what you should see here in a second is that we get the login screen, and just like that, I could type in my super secret password of 123456, and I could log back into this machine. Now, Dan, that really takes care of, there is one more thing. I'm going to go Columbo on you on this one, like I like to do so many other times, right? Let me go ahead and shut that air server down here, and let's say that I've got an application that just doesn't want to play nice, all right? So I went ahead and launched up Chrome, and I'm not picking on Chrome by any means, but let's say that this application hangs on me, all right? It locks up, and I can't shut it down. Well, I got some options here.
You go to the task manager. Oh, wait.
Wrong operating system, Dan. That's right.
But it works really well for that.
That's right. Wrong side of the river.
Yeah.
But he is right if we were in Windows, right? So what we can do is we can actually do what's known as a force quit. You might hear this in like the Android operating systems. They call it a force stop. I mean, pretty much the same thing. Task kill, process kill inside of Linux, right? Issuing a command. And there's a way that you can actually do this. Notice if I right click on the icon that's in the dock here, I don't see what I want. But the moment I basically, let's see here, let me zoom in, see if you guys can see that. I'm holding the option button.
Yeah.
And what happens here is it allows me the ability to do a force quit. I want to say the other way that you can do this too is with the activity monitor. And I can't remember. I believe you can. You can go to, yeah, so you can go to like Google Chrome here and notice this option up here, force a process to quit. It doesn't say force quit on it. And that's what they call out. They call out force quit, so I just wanted to show you that. But that's another way that you can do that with the activity monitor as well. Again, keep in mind all you have to do is right-click on whatever the application is in the dock and just hold down your Alt key or your Option key, and that gives you the ability to force quit it, and you can shut it down. And notice that one of the things about the dock here is if an application is active and it's open, or, well, let me be careful with that. It can be open and it has a dot under it, but it can be closed and still active, hence why you might need to do a force quit. When that dot goes away, you can see that you've actually killed the application. If you still think that you haven't killed the application, launch your activity monitor, right? And you can find whatever the process is. Make sure that it's an application. You don't want to start messing with processes that are in here because they could be system processes, and that could cause you some problems here. But you could find whatever the problem is. Like I know I can kill Flux here, and it's not going to cause a problem here. And I could do kill, and it asks me if I want to do a force quit. And when I do that, apparently, yep, there it goes. It's gone. So a couple different ways that you can do that. Now, Dan, it does look like might have a little small part 3 in this one because we still got some Linux commands that we got to talk about, but I know we don't have time.
No, we're fresh out of time for today, but or at least this episode, should I say. So we will do that. Very good. But part 3, I'm loving it. Loving every last second. It gives us more time to focus on the Linux side of things. Make sure we're not rushing through anything. Make sure all that pertinent information is there for you guys out there. Wes, thanks so much for joining us today and teaching us all that you've taught us. Looking forward to seeing what else you've got on the plate. Join us then. As for this episode, we're going to go ahead and sign off. For IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Daniel Lowry.
And I'm Wes Bryan.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.